presumption.
I've dealt with it a couple
affects your
times.
health.
It's like,
And then that could
Is it so individualized?
Hey, we're coming online.
Our medical records, everything.
I mean, she doesn't have qualifications for
We're on?
Yep.
Alrighty. Hey, we're on. Welcome everyone. We have a guest tonight who is going to talk to everybody about the negotiations with the governor's office for MFPE and all of the locals that are involved in that. And I assume it's higher ed as well. So if you want to chat and talk about that, that'd be great. Rich Arstead, who is the Secretary Treasurer of MFPE.
Just treasurer.
Treasurer, I remember.
When we merged, we lost the secretary part, which is good because my shorthand was bad. So we've had one meeting so far. Beginning in July, we met as a group first for about four hours or so, 3 or 4 hours. And essentially what we did there was we went through the survey that MFPE put out. How many of you filled out the survey online? Most of you, good. So we had a fairly good response on the survey. Close to 400 people responded, which in terms of surveys isn't bad. And so the bulk of the conversation in that first meeting for us was wrapped around the responses to the questions on the survey. And if you recall, there was a question about, whether folks preferred a percentage increase or not, whether they preferred a flat dollar amount increase, if they would like to see an increase in per diem. And those of you that were there, help me out.
Was the
Floating holiday.
Yeah, the floating holidays.
was the
Columbus Day
sick
was
leave, sick leave.
a big one. Sick leave payout and so forth. So as far as the negotiating team is concerned, all of that is on the table. We meet next week, or we met later that day with the governor's office, the governor's representatives. We had a report from the budget office. I can't remember the gentleman's name. I've met him before. Maybe Jill knows who it is.
Assistant to Dan Villa.
No, it wasn't Villa. Villa was there.
Yeah, it was the assistant to Dan Villa.
Villa left, and
He said that he was the prognosticator, the lead prognosticator.
I'm not sure who it would have been. No.
He's given a report to us before. He's very knowledgeable, and so he talked about what the budget picture was looking like and so forth. And of course, he tied it to what's going on in the national level as well, because our finances are attached to what happens at the federal level too. And so one of the things that I think struck most of us from that conversation was the fact that we were going to see an initial bounce up with the Trump tax cut, but in the coming fiscal years, that was going to drop off fairly quickly. And so what was going to look like an increase in revenue was actually going to become a deficit rather quickly as the amount of federal dollars coming back to the state shrunk because of the tax cut.
I think there was only a bump up because very wealthy people were
They paid their
prepaying
taxes. Right.
Or holding off for a period of time.
Right.
Right.
Is essentially what's going to come through in the next year, because they can put it off for only so long before they end up having to pay it. And now that things have settled, they'll probably be.
So there was an initial bump, but he said not to hang your hats on that. That the budget outlook would get a bit more bleak after that. And then we had an extremely long presentation from Health and Benefits about the health insurance plan and so forth. And I'll be honest with you, after about 30 minutes of that, my brain just went dead. But essentially,
mostly just touting how she had.
That's such a good job.
Yeah.
Which she has.
Yeah.
Yes, and she has, but there's still problems with her.
And
totally fool all of us all the time.
what maybe the picture will look like in terms of increases to the health plan as we go forward as well. So, and then we came back here and started hammering out a very rough proposal to present to the governor's office next week. We're also talking quite a bit about putting together a support team for the bargaining team. And the support team's primary function is going to be getting the word out to the membership. This is something that we've run into in the past, trying to run this game, is that it has a tendency to end up just being Helena folks. And, you know, if you listen to Austin Knudsen and his minions and so forth, you know, we live in a bubble, we don't understand what the real world is like and so forth. So we need those members out in the nether regions of Montana, in all 56 counties, writing into their representative and telling them exactly what the picture looks like for them in terms of pay and benefits and those types of things. And if we don't have that, we're gonna end up in the same situation that we have been in for the last several sessions, where it's gonna be a small core group here in Helena that's going to be trying to break down the wall. And that's extremely difficult because it's easy for those who don't have us in their district to ignore us. We don't essentially count. So that's something that the support team is supposed to help with, is the communications aspect of that, and see if we can't get more people involved in that process. Because quite honestly, that's the only way we get a pay plan passed through the legislature, is if folks are willing to speak out in support of it and put pressure on their legislators to support it. If they stay silent, we're stuck. Monty?
Well, I was just wondering, when you were talking about who gave the budget update, that was from the governor's budget office?
Yeah.
Well, because we just had a couple of very in-depth presentations from the legislative fiscal office, and as you probably know, they don't agree very often. And so it was a different story that we were hearing, and I don't know if somebody from the team would like us to organize a little sit down with somebody from legislative services, the fiscal division, to get a different, they just published a very comprehensive outlook for the 2021 biennium, and it did not, yes, there is a little bump, but they did not have it dropping off so much.
I think we
They
do
don't
need
think
that
the
other
bump is,
side.
pardon?
I think we do need that other side of the story.
But did they project a drop off?
Not really, no, it was because they don't think this bump that, there is a Trump bump, but it wasn't as big as.
They didn't anticipate.
So it's not gonna be as much of a drop off. Anyway, if you would like, I know we could arrange to have get a slightly.
So it's going to be fascinating because Villa he is trying to develop a better relationship with our legislative fiscal division so that they can work together. Yes. It's a new thing. It's a brand spanking new thing because the fighting isn't seeming to help anybody at this moment.
So Hoven, he's a senator, or is
Hoven.
he? Hoven. He's a senator, right?
Yes.
Okay. So my experience with what you talked about earlier, when you contact your legislators, he never answers shit. He never answers me on anything. The other guy, Travat, he does okay. He comes back at me and responds accordingly. So, you know, when you're talking about these legislators, some unfortunately happen to be Republicans and they just have no interest in talking about any of these issues. What then? What do you suggest then as far as?
And it's okay that they don't always respond. I mean, you're right.
He never.
Yeah, okay, if they never respond, because if you send it to their legislative email, not their campaign email or something, they can track and they can see how many, or just make a call, and they track how many people have called in support of something or in opposition to something. So you can always use that as argument. These are how many people have contacted a legislator in support of this.
Well, and always preface it with the fact that you live in their district.
Yeah.
You're
Oh, yeah.
voting,
I am a
you're
constituent.
a voter in their district and this is your thoughts on that piece of
You know,
legislation.
I do that.
And, again.
And I expect to hear back.
Well,
Have you ever
Would
tried
it be
that?
more fair to
Response.
say, or more accurate to say that really the Republicans just, they got a good game plan and they all just kind of stick to it and it doesn't really matter what any of us say and do, they're gonna follow their map all the way through to the
You can't
end.
believe that, you can't,
It
otherwise
feels
they do.
that way.
I know
It
it does.
feels that way, it
But
really
you
does.
can actually have conversations
With
and so
Homer.
forth with both sides of the aisle. And I actually think it is effective to have those conversations and that open dialogue with the Republican caucus. The last thing you wanna do is shut it down. Because when you shut it down, then you're drawing hard lines in the sand
And Homer's
then
a
the
good
tough
guy.
decisions have to be made, and so the best thing that you can do is keep the line of communication open. And if you're not having any luck with them, have another member from up in your area write them, or several members write them. Again, this is where that negotiating support team is gonna come in handy. We can't just rely on a few to carry the weight for everybody.
No, absolutely not.
It just doesn't work. And we need to have those voices from outside of Helena chime in. And so, work with your local to have a legislative contact day.
And Keith, you
Yeah.
can harass everybody in that area. Doesn't have to be just yours.
I do. These guys hate my guts.
Good.
And the
Means you're
thing
doing
is,
your job.
Half the people don't check their emails, particularly the mt.gov one. It's a disgrace, I couldn't agree more, and then because it's such a terrible server, whatever, at a certain point it, and I don't know, does it bounce back to his, it's never bounced back to you, but at a certain point, your mailbox is full, pretty easily reached, and then, so it may just be, I was just, calling.
That's the other thing, there's nothing wrong with crashing the email system. A few years ago, we crashed the telephone system several times, and there's nothing wrong with that either. We can flood the Capitol building with calls and emails from outside of the Helena area. That just adds weight to the arguments that are being made in the hall.
And he's got a private email, brian@hovenequipment.com.
Yeah, that's the one I've sent, about 37 emails to that one.
Nice.
So maybe his response isn't the problem, and it's that he's a legislator. One
I
by
don't think
any
he's even running right now, is he?
And he might not be, but there's lots of folks who don't support the pay plan who are. And I think having those conversations with our families and our friends and our neighbors about what that means and why that's important, and it's not a Democrat versus Republican thing, it's we support state employees, we support public services, we support the people that those services provide for, and the fact is that, this legislator doesn't support those things, and are those values in line with the things that we want to support.
It's a good letter to the editor,
Absolutely.
citing the fact that you sent 37 emails and there has been zero response to.
Yeah, okay.
It's a really good one.
It's pulling out all the stops that we have available to us. Letters to the editor, emails to their government email address, emails to their private email address if they have it, telephone calls to the same thing, and getting the members to support that. That's the biggest key right there, is we go nowhere with the amount of support that we have now. The enthusiasm in this room is great, but unless that's at least tenfold outside of this room, we're screwed. And Janice is gonna make it doubly difficult. As a matter of fact, we're going to need a lot more than that with Janice out there now.
But just in terms of communication, we have all of our local 4573 members in an action network email. So I send out emails to these people. There's 550 of them or whatever in our local. But what does MFPE have? When we finally get this proposal, how do we get that out to whatever it is, 20,000 people and 12,000 people or whatever it is instead of
Well,
my 550 people.
that's one of the things that's incumbent upon, and this is why, I always say that the most important work that can be done for our union is through our local. And having the contact information for our local members so that that information can be pushed out to them. So that they can be informed about what's going on. And we've tried various versions of that as well. We've sent out electronic newsletters, we've sent out paper newsletters, we've flyered buildings and so forth. And again, all of those have to be used. If we fall down on one, we lose. So all of that has to be part of the game plan. So one of the best things that you can do as a local leader is get a census of your members, their names, the positions that they hold. And I think Morgan's been working on that for a long time. Not their work phone number and work email, their home phone number and their home email. And again, you guys know as well as I do, we work 90% of our time, most of us do. I don't know about Jill. It's hard to know what she's cooking up the street. Every once in a while we see the fire trucks up there. But we spend most of our day on the computer. So the last thing that we want to do when we get home is turn on our personal email account. So we use social media, we use email, we use flyers on the bulletin boards that we can use in the buildings and so forth. We have quick 15-minute meetings during the day to keep members informed about what's going on and about actions and so forth. And again, this is one of the purposes for that support team for the bargaining is so we can grow that network and we have more people doing that. Yeah.
So what are we asking for?
That's a good question, and honestly, I'm not gonna answer it, because if I tell you what we're asking for right now, we are online, don't know where that goes. Next week, we sat down with the governor's office and they already know what we're asking for. So that's not really, I don't think, smart bargaining.
A Learjet in every household.
I will say that
I wanna go
everything that was on that survey is in the package. We worked it all into the package, and so
I don't remember what.
we'll go forward from there.
I have a copy, do you want me to go get that survey? I'll do it.
Was there a number on there?
There was not a number
No.
on there.
No.
It was
And part of that,
percentage or flat.
and part of that is because, we have to know as well as the governor's office and the legislature what the budget's gonna look like. And so that's a lot of what this early process is about, is trying to nail down where the budget is going to be. Because it doesn't do us any good to ask for more than what we even know ourselves we can get.
What if I disagree with you respectfully? What if I say,
You can disagree with
I
me
don't-
disrespectful.
I don't care what the budget looks like, make it happen, figure it out. Other states went on strike, other states figured it out. They dug deep, they got the money, they took care of the teachers, they did what they had to do. Montana can do it too. Why can't we think like that?
So we can think of like that, but my counter to that was when you say figure it out, it's us that has to figure it out.
Why do we have to figure out what the state thinks they have to pay their employees, as opposed to what they spend all their other money, what they spend the money on? Okay,
Well,
let's
this is
there's
the
a couple of
purpose.
strategies that we could give them, like, we don't care. But there are ways that they can pay for this. Give it only to non-management. Okay, because we're not bargaining for managers. So that's 60 million that
And we're
Larry
not worried
threw out
about
there
non-union
can be
members?
30 million.
We don't bargain for management.
Right,
That's
that's the governor, so that's where we need to hold the governor accountable, like only put in the amount that
Covers us.
covers us. What about flattening the hierarchy? Why do we need managers that supervise at 0.5 or one person? or all the managers at HCSD that gave themselves $30,000 a year raises in the last 2 years.
Although that
Every one
sucks,
of them.
that's a debate for another day. We gotta get back to
But
what I
that's how
just
they
said.
pay for it. They flatten up. When the Republicans talk about the bureaucracy in Helena needs to tighten their belts, I don't think they're talking about Keith at child support or me.
Yeah, they are.
No, not totally.
Don't let them fool you. Here a few years ago, they ran this game on us that we're sick and tired of seeing a percentage increase. You come at us with a flat dollar amount, and it's a done deal. So we did. It was not a done deal. We went down to the 11th hour once again. So don't let them fool you with this game that they feel bad for the little guy. They want to do everything in their power for you. It's that damn manager that we want to get. That's not the game. That's not.
But that is our game.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
What do you mean?
Well,
how
does that work? We're going to go in and we're going to negotiate with the governor's office for an increase for bargaining unit members. That's all we're going to bargain for.
Right.
The governor has the right to put whatever he wants to in
Yes,
his
he
budget.
does.
It's his budget.
But then he can't say, well, we can't afford any raise, or we have to afford less raise because I'm going to give it to everybody outside of the bargaining unit.
We don't care.
Just let's ratchet it back a little bit. The governor proposes a budget. He has no control over what the legislature decides that budget is. That's their job. They hold the purse strings. House Appropriations is where the power is at. The governor can propose a budget. His budget has never come out like he's proposed it. It's always been cut. Because the legislature makes that decision. So you have to understand who your opponent in this situation is. We bargain a salary increase with the governor's office that we believe that is fair and equitable, that we can get through the legislature. And then it goes to the legislature, and we're done bargaining with the governor's office. It's lobbying the legislature at that point. And that's where the contact and so forth becomes so important.
But the price tag that goes with the increase that we bargain.
Again, it's the governor's prerogative to put what he or she wants to in that budget.
Right.
All we can do is negotiate what we see as a fair and equitable increase for our members. That's all we can do. What happens after that, we don't have any control over.
And the governor doesn't either.
The governor doesn't either. Once it goes there, he's in the same boat we are. He's lobbying to get the pieces of his budget through the legislature that are most important to him.
Sometimes he has a little bit more of an oomph to it because he can make deals and get legislators on board, and he's got a little bit of a but the pressure still has to come from somewhere.
Right.
And so I keep coming back to the fact that the union is the only voice. So when people start talking about dropping their union membership, every single person who does that tells me that they don't care about a race, that they don't want a race. Because if you drop the union, there is no venue, there is no voice.
Or any of the other benefits that
I agree.
care about so
And you
much
can
and
tell them
just
that
talk
till the
about.
cows come home, but again, we are in.
Well, and unfortunately, sometimes it comes down to the point where you end up going to the woodshed and getting your ass beat. And then you decide from that point on that that's not acceptable. I don't know if rank and file members feel that way yet or not. I know a few do, but whether or not enough do, we don't know that for sure. I mean, what's the real pain then? What's the real pain then? We saw some rifts last year, but
Not getting the respect. We just got, okay, I'm gonna bring this up because it pissed me off. And yeah, it's a governor's award, big deal. Well, to us, it's a big freaking deal. Our administration didn't approve anybody in IT after we got forced to move all of our network over onto the same network on a governor's directive, and we worked our asses off for 10 months. I mean, dedicating almost all of our time on it between all three of our bureaus, and we got shafted. We didn't get mentioned and nothing. Nobody got jack shit.
Nobody ever does in my division, and we close the books for the whole damn thing.
Okay, so.
But we get paid for it,
So we don't
that's
get
our
it, the big
job.
thing is we don't get respect for management.
I'm gonna make y'all mad because this is the real world and not everybody gets a trophy.
Exactly.
But I understand,
Exactly.
but
That's our
nonetheless,
job.
what I'm saying is we
But
get no
get paid.
respect for
We get
management.
paid to make those changes and
Yeah,
those.
that's our job.
I got a reward and I'm sorry, but I felt insulted. I said, I get paid to do this. This is what I'm getting paid to do, is the START program.
And you
And to get it off on
And you
time.
don't work one bit harder than all the rest of us that didn't get the
Exactly,
governor's excellence award.
exactly. I
Well,
did
and
not
I think,
work
and
any
I think it was a
longer.
political
You're right.
move,
You're right.
because Stuart Fuller
Especially those
left,
whole groups.
because he was sick and tired of how our current management is running things. It's a girls' club up there, and I'm sorry to say that, but it is.
Wait, put the mean in front of it, the Mean Girls Club.
It's a mean girls' club who's running our agency now, and they can't stand Stuart Fuller. He left.
Part of that's being in public service.
Okay.
We all get that, and I feel that as much as you do. Me and Diane work in an agency that is considered non-essential. We don't protect, we don't provide any type of health services or anything like that. We don't bring in revenue like the Department of Revenue. We're a non-essential agency. Why the hell do we keep this agency around?
Because that's what we do, is we collect history.
Because if you don't understand your history, you're condemned to live the past.
And
Yeah,
everybody
absolutely.
in the world will say that until it comes to funding it. So you get what you're talking about that, but a large part of that is being public service. The other way to think about that though is those folks across the street feel the same way. They get the hell beat out of them by their constituents and so forth. They feel like they're not getting any gratitude for the hard work that they do. The fact that they disrupt their lives for 90 days a year, or 90 days every 2 years, to come up here and try to do the best that they can for Montana. So in actuality, we have a lot in common with those folks.
Didn't they vote themselves a 14% raise?
The first day.
Usually the
And
first
you know,
order
that
of
was an
business.
argument I
Didn't it
tried
pass?
to use, that we are all
We don't
public
get it.
servants,
Oh.
and it is, we are public servants. And that is something I grew up being proud of, because my dad was, and I've always been, and I think we all take pride in that. But you're right, we do get shit on a lot, because it's an easy
It's an easy
target.
target.
And so we have to move beyond. If I could ask just one question, just a slight divergence from this though. So last time with the bargaining, they're really, with all the hard work that you guys put in, because you were on the bargaining team last time. So come in to discuss things, it basically there were no negotiations. There was very little discussion. The governor came in and said, this is what we're offering, take it or leave it, kind of thing.
The team came in, the governor's team came in and said, we don't have any room to negotiate whatsoever. And so they proposed the 1%
Yeah,
that
the one
we all saw, and they proposed an implementation date in January.
right.
We managed to get that changed to a November implementation, and then the legislature bounced it to February.
February.
So we
And
did.
it was, I mean, nobody wasn't lining the halls with the flat rate, the 50 cents, which fell, as you have pointed out, fell to everybody here in Helena to line those halls during their lunch hour. And nobody bothers you, because 1 and 1 is just, I mean, that sucks, particularly if you're at the low end of the.
It was.
It's hard to go and stand there and be degraded and insulted when you're asking for a pay raise.
And for a minimum.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we've stood up there and we've had snide remarks of, well, why should we give you a pay raise? You obviously don't need to go to work, or have the fingers poked at you, or.
Well, and here's the other
It's
side
very
of that.
frustrating.
It's even more difficult to do it when there's so few of you in the hall.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and
So-
but it was a monumental effort in 2015. I mean, they really
It's-
did. But the people just took the back stairs and said,
Yeah.
I never.
They ran.
But my question, I guess, is if they come in, and that's why I would urge maybe discussion with the fiscal division, just to see if, I think they have it was really helpful.
Except for, what do you believe? I mean, it's probably gonna be somewhere in the middle, but that doesn't really help us.
But it's good to have that other, that's up to you all. But, I mean, if they come in with that, just this is all, we're not, we're not starting up here, they're starting down here and we meet here. I mean, if they just say, here's all we can give you and do we have a plan of action or is this
Yeah,
depend on what they say?
You know, it's a
What's the
little
bare minimum we're gonna take? What, you know, and I know you said you can't discuss what we're asking for, but.
But are you anticipating a more collaborative, I guess that's the bottom line, are you anticipating a more collaborative process this time?
Yeah.
that's
Dan Villa did ask us, he advised us to get creative.
Great.
That's what I.
That's a plus.
And so part of that is why we have such a broad list of items that we're taking to the table.
Good.
That's excellent.
You know,
Because it's not just about the money.
it's not just about the money. The money's probably the most important thing, but there are other ways that we can benefit state employees.
How is it not about the money?
Sorry, it's the most important thing.
Yeah,
Let's fast forward
I'm
to
like,
April
you know, when I'm making less
2019,
than I did in
where
2007,
the legislature has
it's
shut
about the
everything
money.
down, they haven't passed anything, it's all gone to crap. We're not gonna get anything. Then what are we going to do? That's why I'm here. It's the only reason I came today. What are we gonna do?
I don't know, what are you gonna do?
Strike?
By yourself?
If I have to.
Okay.
I mean, I'll rally everyone I can in Great Falls, but yeah, we need to have that conversation.
What are the rules
We need to
around
prepare for
strike?
it.
We
We
can
need
always
to
strike
do it during
during
session.
session.
Leadership needs to develop a
Well,
plan.
Well, we're in
guess
contract.
I guess I don't understand. I mean, if the discussion is about strike and so forth, those are conversations that you can have in your local for sure.
Sure.
You know, and take the temperature of where folks are feeling and so forth. But there has to be some reality in those discussions as well. You don't get paid.
Yep.
You don't get your benefits. All those people who were agency fee payers are crossing the picket line. And you gotta stay out. If you're gonna win, you gotta stay out. How long are you prepared to stay out? You got a mortgage?
I could go a month maybe if I had to.
A month. Okay, so the strike goes 7.5 weeks.
I don't think it
happens?
would last longer than a week.
Okay, you wouldn't last longer than a week? So what good does it do to go out on strike?
What I'm saying is I think the state would give in after about a week.
Because their position is so
Nobody's
weak.
showing up for work.
They're
Nothing's getting done. They're getting calls from everyone who's getting welfare, Medicaid, TANF, all of it, disability services, this, that, and the other thing, and they're screaming through the phone, get these guys back to work and do it right now.
not necessarily. Again, we had that conversation. Who's an easy target for the public to take it out on? Our primary job is to uphold the legislation that is done in that building and translate that to the public and take care of it. Who catches the shit?
We do.
We do, because we're the frontline troops, not the legislature. We catch it. So you have to have public support, even if you do have public support. That's not a proven give me for those folks that go out on strike. So I'm not opposed to going out on strike. I've seen what they look like, and honestly, if a strike doesn't scare the hell out of you, you've got a problem. Because it needs to scare the hell out of you. Doesn't mean that you don't face that fear and do it, but you gotta understand what's going on. Your mortgage isn't getting paid, your car payments aren't getting paid, you're not buying groceries for your family. I mean, things get tough really fast. A lot tougher than what they are now. And you know, it's easy to rattle our sabers now when we're all still getting paid, checks still coming in every 2 weeks and so forth. It's easy to do that now. So there has to be some serious hurt by the majority before a strike actually works. Because if the strike fails, you break the union. You break the union, we don't have any voice left whatsoever. And I'll go ahead and be the doomsday guy because I feel that way today. I wanted to put a sign on my office door today that said, there aren't enough bullets in the world. It's time to get a nuke. And that's the way it is. Because in 2 years, we're gonna have a Republican governor. In 2 years, we're still gonna have a Republican legislature. And in 3 years, we're gonna lose collective bargaining for public employees. We're not gonna be able to bargain wages. We're not gonna be able to bargain shit. Then what happens?
That's your worst case scenario.
That's the scenario.
Well,
better
then
be
why would you
worst
even be worried then? That's like worrying about what happens after you die.
When
Of course,
is this?
You're dead,
I
right?
got 17 years into the state of Montana. I worry about my retirement.
Yeah.
Because what's gonna happen about
Okay,
that?
but if you're saying it is a done deal, that is what's gonna happen, then why worry about it? What can we do about
I worry about
do
it so that
something about it.
I can plan some type of defense against it. That's why.
Okay, so that
So
we can like
maybe
make it not happen.
It's not the point of rolling over and just letting them stick a fork in you.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be overly optimistic and say that we can stop it from happening. Montana's going Republican, full bore.
Montana's been Republican.
Yeah, exactly.
For quite a while, yeah. But it's
Since like the 60s.
Yeah, but it's
not since the
become more
60s.
anti.
It is.
I mean, I feel that
It's turning to more deep.
the the turning
And you
to
know this from
blaming
knocking
because
doors in Helena.
Well, knocking doors,
Well,
talking to people, I've talked a lot, I mean, I'm a Republican, and I'll be the first one to say, I won't vote Republican.
But you see, you're seeing it from a
I
very
know,
small
but
slice,
even the
Renee.
girl
You're seeing
last
it from
night-
Helena.
The girl last night, her and her sister-in-law are Republicans, and she said the same thing.
Where do they live?
White Sulphur Springs, and one lives in Helena. The
One
White
lives in
Sulphur
Helena.
Springs lives, and that person, she wrote a letter to him. What's his name?
Yeah, but don't discount what we're doing in Helena, Rich, because we do talk to people
No, I don't
outside
discount
it.
what happens here in Helena.
We talk to a
Not at
lot
all.
of people.
I mean, Helena's what honestly has carried the pay plan for the last several sessions. If it hadn't have been for the Helena members, and damn few of them, a pay plan would not have happened. And people like Jill in the legislature who are willing to work towards that pay plan. Okay? And
But we're just hearing like a different attitude where when people say, well, they're not happy, they're Republicans. They're embarrassed by it. We're getting a lot of that. So that's what I'm saying is I don't see this big rally of Republicans anymore. I'm seeing that like I'm embarrassed. Monique is embarrassed. Over here, are you a strong Republican like you was a few years ago?
so,
over
but
this?
can you say that
You know?
before the election?
I would. I won't vote him.
So what? I say
okay.
let's wait and see what happens during the election.
Yeah, no,
During the
November.
midterm.
November's going to be the big key point.
The midterm
And
is going to
tell
decide some of that
people
stuff.
who are disenfranchised and disenchanted with the top of the ticket, say don't vote it. I mean, because really what goes on in DC affects you a hell of a lot less than what goes on
Yeah.
at the local level. So who
And
your
Mon-
legislator is, who your school board members are, all those, I mean, that's where we have to really.
Except for primary's over, and now you can pick whoever the hell you want
But see,
to.
I
so,
never vote in the primary. Guess what? I voted in the primary. I voted all the way.
Democratic. So they've had 40 years of essentially throwing us all under the bus. And our own members don't talk about their work the way they should. They talk about their work in very poor ways, which all that does is add to the whole problem. The problem is that people don't value the public services that we provide anymore.
Right.
Because
They don't
take them
see.
for granted.
Yes, they take them for granted, and it's been talked down for such a long period of time. So part of it is, I really think we need an action plan for our membership, which is, you need the letters to the editor saying the service that I provide is critical to our community. I do good work. If I'm not here, people will suffer. And people in child support need to say, if I don't collect child support for the clients that I have, then more children are going to be on SNAP and need more benefits, and that's going to put more pressure on the state's budget. That's the kind of thing that actually needs to show up in some of these Republican newspapers. And then those people, family members, need to write in and say, my family member puts a lot into the economy and she takes care of people. And once we start rolling some of that, then when we go to the legislature, we can point and say, hey, I know there was people in your neighborhood from your constituency that wrote to you and told you how important this is to your community. If they're not there, then your community suffers, and I can help to hold them accountable. Mafi can hold them accountable. But we have to have the work done. The work has to get done because it's only the people in this room is not enough.
No.
And to talk about our jobs in terms of its economic value is probably more powerful than to talk about, you know, I help 3 families that have autistic kids. It's like, you can just see the eyes rolling out in rural Montana. They don't care about those.
That's actually really what it is. That's what I found in the legislature. Legislators do not understand anybody's plight until they have been through it. Or they have a family member going through it. Otherwise, they don't know. All of a sudden, you know, somebody will come back to the legislature and they'll be all over EITC or something. Oh my God, because
But
I
again,
know
that's
something.
building the base to build up. And you mentioned 40 years of erosion, and we need to work on the base, and that starts with us, and that starts in the locals, and that starts having local meetings with folks. You know, there's a lot of people bent because of the Janus decision, and it infringes on my free speech, and they only support Democrats and so forth. You know, there are arguments to be made against that. You find me a Democrat that will stand up, or a Republican that will stand up in public and say that they support collective bargaining for us, and they support the work that we do.
Tim Fox.
I'll endorse them. Really?
And we have.
No.
We actually have.
Tim Fox. Really?
I
Because when I asked him straight out if he supported collective bargaining for public employees, you know what he said?
No.
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that guy.
He said nothing, or
He
he
said
said
nothing.
no?
He said nothing.
And I mean, I know it.
They need to stop being ashamed of the people that they're going to looking for support. We've had Republicans approach our union and ask for support, but they want support behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that has to stop.
Yeah.
I'm a historian by trade. I go through history stuff all the time. Last week I was going through a publication that was done out of Great Falls for the labor convention they were having up there for the, I think they were calling it the Northwest Montana Central Labor Council. Anyhow, every other page, no lie, had a Republican candidate running for office. It was endorsed by labor.
See it anymore.
It's happening.
That's the old school.
You can do it. You just have to have Republicans that are brave enough to stand up. You have to have Republicans that show up at the candidate interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another big issue. I mean, we try to interview all of the candidates, but if they just don't show up, and that's one of I think this is one of the reasons why the romance with Fox is because he shows up.
He just said, you know, at the AFL-CIO, he just talked highly of unions and what the unions have done and how they built Montana. You know.
He's at the AFL-CIO.
Well, I know, but he didn't. He could have said, no, I'm too busy.
He could have, but he didn't. He showed up. But when it comes to tough, that's you're going to trust Tim Fox in 2 years to be our governor and protect the collective bargaining rights for public employees?
No. I would trust him more than I would Giaforte.
When does this appropriations committee meet to go over the governor's budget?
In the legislature.
During the session?
Yeah, it's a legislative committee out of the
Yeah.
House of
And
Representatives.
a bunch of us have testified before when they introduced the bill, and that's the other thing that we have to stop and consider. You know, the pay plan is a political football, and we get used. We get used as a bargaining chip. That's what's happened the last several sessions. This is one of the reasons it gets held so late is deal making. And Jill can probably speak better to that than I can about what goes on behind closed doors and so forth, and the give and the take and so forth that goes along. We have to understand that, and our members have to understand that this is a political process and it will always be a political process.
And anyone who says that their job is not political is stupid.
Yeah.
Because our jobs every single day are political. Because that's where the money comes from. That's where the budget for everything we do comes from. That's where your raise comes from. That's where your benefits come from.
So what the bottom line is, I don't know. The thing is that, and this is another thing that the members have to understand, the pre-budget negotiating team bargains to a tentative agreement, but it's up to the membership to vote it up or down. But the membership has to participate. Again, it always goes back to that. The membership has to participate. The last few votes that we've had on membership has been absolutely dismal.
Did we vote on the 1%?
We didn't vote on the 1%.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
You know,
I haven't been around
and
that
again,
long.
part of that was a strategy by the bargaining team. Was, okay, so why are we gonna have our membership vote for a negotiated deal with the governor's office just to see it go to the legislature and get pulled apart?
Yeah.
So we didn't, and maybe that was a misstep, I don't know. But in essence, and this is where private sector unionism and public sector unionism differ mightily, is when you reach a tentative agreement in the private sector with your employer and the membership votes it up, it's a done deal. You don't mess with it without creating an unfair labor practice. What happened when the legislature kicked the pay plan to the curb in 2011 and the unions filed an unfair labor practice against them, the decision was in favor of the legislature, saying that once bargaining is done with the governor's office, collective bargaining is finished. So the legislature isn't our employer.
So guess what? That just put a target where it should have been all along, is in the heads of the legislators. Those legislators are the ones who can make or break us.
So where are we voting?
Well, and that's
No,
where we
you
have
vote
to start
for-
thinking
November.
about changing. I know you guys have talked about this, about changing the process a little bit. Get the legislature more involved so that they are part of the process. So they can't say, because part of the reason is they've been pissed off at the governor. And so they
take
do
it
it,
out on
they
that.
say,
Well,
yeah,
that's
well, so
hostage.
they don't want, they say, we had nothing to do with this process, we had nothing to do with these negotiations, and fair enough, I understand that aspect of it. And they don't have anybody representing the legislature, you know, somebody, even if not to participate, but to sit in on, to observe, and we've asked them if they want to, but some of those very powerful.
Oh, they know they don't
Well,
want to be held
and-
accountable to anything.
You know, right now, statutorily, we have to bargain with the governor's
Yeah,
office.
exactly.
And we can't dictate who they sit at the table with them. So, does that mean that there's gonna be change in statute at some point? Maybe. But that has to, again, come from the membership. And not just the membership being active with the legislature, but the membership being active within their union. So that when we have meetings and we have our annual convention and so forth, we show up. I've gone to the last several and, you know, there are new faces, but there are more old faces than there are new ones. So what do we do about that? Folks have to care enough to show up.
But don't you think, I mean, you don't think there aren't more young people that are joining? I mean, your age group, what is the attitude towards unions? I mean, I think unions are more popular than they used to be.
In some places,
I agree.
you know, I think they're getting there. But it's getting them to use annual leave to do some of the stuff that's required.
Well, that's where we can negotiate, is saying somebody that's doing union work, because you do have that, you do get special.
You can negotiate that in your.
Yeah, it's in our local
bargaining
contract.
Yeah,
agreement.
exactly.
And what we got, I think 80 hours in
But it
ours?
has to be
Oh.
approved.
And it's only for
For the
the
RA.
For the RA, yeah.
You do have to negotiate it, but it can be worked. And, you know, that's the other part of this. Folks have to understand that just because
Yes.
the union flexes its muscle, things automatically go the union's way. It doesn't. It never has. This is why it's called collective bargaining. This is why it's called negotiation. Nobody comes out of the deal 100% satisfied. So what we do is we get as close as we can and then fight like hell for that.
But don't you think, I guess I get a sense that a lot of my colleagues like blame the union, just reflexively, like that we're not fighting hard enough, or
Well,
we
they
didn't
are
really do
the
it.
union, so.
I know, but
Just
okay,
like
that's,
public servants.
except for the, okay, I've heard that often enough, but let's get real here, like last time, the negotiating, I mean, they didn't even put it out for a vote, the 1%. So how can you say we are the union if we didn't even get to vote on it?
We are
And like, this thing about this gag rule about not being able to talk about what we talked about in the economic pre-budget negotiating thing is weird too. So many people have asked me, what's going on? What are you talking about? And I'm like,
She can't.
But again, do you wanna tell everybody?
Yeah.
No. So it goes to the governor's office before we actually have a chance.
I don't think
Does it
anybody
really
I know
matter?
is gonna
Does it
run up
really
to the
matter?
governor's
You don't,
office.
man.
You're right, I mean, you never know.
Nobody wants to gain favor with an industry.
I mean,
Okay, but what if we when we get our proposal, which we basically have, we have a draft, right? And why can't we send that out to our members and what the governor came back with? So they know
They've got that far yet.
well, yeah, for one thing, we haven't got that far yet.
Okay, but
So let's
can we
wait
do
until
that?
let's wait till we have the discussion.
Okay.
Here's one of the things too that I've seen go sour on letting folks know real time what's going on. And this was back when we negotiated the 5 and 5. 5 and 5?
3 and 5.
Well, we ended up
negotiated
3
5
and
and
5,
5.
but it was 5 and 5.
So
Wow.
anyhow, we're in the process of negotiating this, and most of you've been in negotiations, right? So you know that sometimes they go well and sometimes things just go south. Well, this was one of those instances where things just went south. And a few members got pissed off, and instead of waiting for us to get through the process and come up with something, they start sending text messages out and start posting stuff on Facebook. And it didn't help the process by any means whatsoever. And the other thing is that there are certain laws that we have to follow. I mean, collective bargaining is encapsulated in a set of laws. And the way collective bargaining is done in the public sector has even more rules applied to it than the private sector. So there is a need to have some bargaining room between the team and the membership, so that the membership isn't whipped to a frenzy when we're just starting out the process.
Because if you say 5 and 5 and then everybody says, well, I want that, I want that, I want that, and you settle for 3 and 3, why didn't you get 5 and 5? I mean, that is what happens in negotiations. Right. And so you really do have to kind of keep it close, because once the agreement is made and everybody knows what's going on, then you can go out there and say, that's what we're going for, that's the thing we're going to hang our hat on.
And it's never going to be enough. And I've heard, I don't know how many people say, well, what are we going to do to catch up? Well, guess what? We're not going to catch up. We're not ever going to be able to negotiate enough to catch up. So
Problem is too, you get these ideas out, like public, like you want to do, and things have a habit of snowballing. You know, you have it on black and white, okay, that we want to negotiate this, but then that kind of builds up and somebody just floats it, and next thing you know, the whole thing is blown way out of proportion.
And again, it does go to the members
members
for the final decision. Granted, the 1% didn't, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how many people actually noticed that it didn't go out for a vote.
I don't know. I didn't notice, but
I mean,
the active
seriously,
members did.
but
The active members did.
everybody blamed the union for that.
everybody blames the union for everything.
Because baby boy,
It is.
So,
So
It's like
what
we're
you
all-
do is you kick the next thing down. You kick the next rung down on the ladder. So what other question did you have that?
The other
No,
question-
nothing. I mean, I'm gonna go back to work tomorrow and tell everyone. I don't know.
So
I mean,
Keith, from
that's-
our standpoint, we're gonna prepare.
Alright.
I'm
Some of
going
that's good
to, I'm
ideas,
gonna
good
challenge our
proposals,
membership
and,
to be prepared.
we're gonna negotiate from there.
And so we'll work on that.
So one of the things, Rich, if you wanna just bring up really quick, is how many's on, this is one of the questions, how many's on the team? How many people are on the team? And is it represented by somebody from every,
How are they
16,
picked?
18?
you know, how are they picked? How are they
Yeah,
picked?
there's about 18, and it's about as broad a sweep as we can get.
And how is it picked? That was the other question, is who picks? Do you-
Well,
I did.
you suggested
Yeah.
for your local and
Okay,
so
yeah,
forth.
you-
Eric Fever reached out to a few and selected. But by and large, the locals were to appoint their delegate. And the other part of this is, you know, with the merger going on, it's gonna take a while for us to get used to working together on this and everybody's process and choosing delegates to do the bargaining and so forth. So, you know, we have to give that time to gel as well.
I thought we had a good session last week, last month, I thought we
did.
Got a lot done, and it's all still kind of muddy, but it's gonna.
But we haven't really even started yet, so
No, we haven't.
muddy is
Oh, I thought the
where it's
way the draft was very specific that Larry put together of everything that we said.
I know when we met with the governor's team.
But there are two sides to the negotiations, and so, you know, we've got to start, and we work from there. And again, it's up to the membership to up or down it.
The next survey, any idea when that's gonna come out?
The next survey? Is there gonna be a next survey?
They said there was gonna be 2, that's what's
They
in the new
said
business
2.
item.
Yep.
So there must be action on the second part of the new business item, so it said there
I
was.
say we cash out our PERS,
What?
get into business together, get out of this shit show. Because that's what it is.
PERS.
Great term.
Handy in 10 years.
A bar, let's open a bar.
Let's open a bar.
Okay.
Let's go camping.
Casinos, that's what makes it.
Thank you all who are doing this.
Yes.
Yeah, we're at the end of our time pretty much too.
Yeah. Rich, thank you.
Hey, thank you for coming down and talking.
Yeah.
Thank you for driving down.
Yeah, thanks for coming here, Keith, that's
Yeah,
important.
driving all the way down here, so
I
that's really all.
tried.
Keith is
That's all you
trying.
can do is keep trying.
Well,
Keep
now you
us
can
trying.
go back though and tell them what we're doing, and maybe you can get somebody to get online.
Positive, say, hey, looking out, we got
But
some
you
good
don't
ideas.
try,
and,
either do or you don't.
Yeah.
No place to go without.
We were talking about when we were in Pittsburgh having our own social event. We were just throwing stupid ideas out, and a couple of them came up with getting a cup and rattling coins in it in the hallways of the legislature.
Always for the pool.
Or and I had one holding an empty tin cup up to a legislature. Can you spare 5% of what's in your pocket for me? I work for the state of Montana.
You know what I always wanted to have us do when we were in the hall outside the House chamber? As the legislators start to walk through, and I apologize, this Monty, but have everybody turn their back to it.
I don't know why we
But
don't.
you
They've done that to us,
But
literally.
here's the problem, is because, I mean, I know when you all were really,
They hide.
in my first session, you all were really on the
Yeah.
phone. The ones who
Smart,
were
probably.
dissing you, just
See ya,
took the
Kate.
back
Hi,
steps.
Kate.
Yeah.
Hi,
They wouldn't
Kate.
talk to you. You
Well, and
know,
there are only
they-
certain places that you can get into and so forth, but, you know, I mean,
I'll
I
let
like
you in.
it. I like
We'll
it.
let Jill and
I like it.